What up, everybody? What is up? Welcome to our Sunday web show right here on youtube.com/thegamelooters. I hope you guys are having a mighty fine weekend. I hope you guys are playing a lot of different games. Today we have a huge episode, a relic of the past, they would call it. We're going to go in our time machine all the way back to 1997 today, and we're going to rewind, just like the name of the show is, the Gaming Rewind. We're going to rewind all the way back, and to help me out on this adventure, to heed this adventure, to captain my ship on this adventure today, I have none other than Mr. Mono, Mr. Pulse himself today to lead us and steer us where we need to go, and that is back in time, baby.
Yes, sir. We are taking back in time, a trip back in time. That's what Gaming Rewind's all about, right? It's about going back, looking at the past, seeing where it brought us today, and, sharing memories and reliving experiences. And we're going so far back in the past this time. I don't even know if all of our viewers were even live in 1997, much less there and playing games. I hope you were. But even if you weren't, I'm sure that somewhere along the line, you either picked it up as a retro gamer, or you picked something up as a hobbyist, or, you had a hand-me-down from your brother and sister. So no matter if you're young or old, if you lived it, if you didn't, we got a fun episode planned for today. Now, what is the episode about? Well, one of the things that's dying, Dom, is gaming publication. As Game Informer starts to dwindle as well, they get layoffs over there. Of course, EGM, one we're going to be talking about today. Physical gaming publications are, other than like your big three, I think Nintendo Power maybe still runs. I don't even know if they still do physical copies.
No, they're all digital. Game Informer is really the... Game Informer and PC Mag are really the last of the Mohicans.
Well, it's really hard to sell physical media anymore. I mean, you go to your Polygons, you go to your Polygon, and you have your what's the other one that's big?
IGN, Kotaku, GameSpot.
Kotaku, that's the other one I was thinking. You go to your Polygons, you go to Kotaku and or Twitter, wherever it is, it's digital. If you go to Reddit, digital consumption is the big deal. But back in the day, back when you were a kid going to elementary school or middle school or even up into high school, you were pulling out one of these. The Electronic Gaming Monthly. Now, some of you guys who may be watching, and Dom, I know you have a collection of EGMs yourself. A lot of people that subscribe, you kept your stock. Well, it's pretty hard. I mean, a lot of people will have maybe about 2,000 and on. That's a pretty common subscription, but I was able to stumble across a wonderful, I don't know if you'll be able to get it with the webcam there, probably not, but a wonderful issue from February 1997. And I was flipping through it, and I shared it with Dom, and he was flipping through it, and we just thought it would be a great talking point on what was gaming like in the world of 1997. What was hype? What was in the news? What memories do we have surrounding anything? Could you look back at it? And there was definitely a couple of times where I was like, oh my God, I forgot about that game, or, oh my God, that game never even made it over here. And it's a throwback to a simpler time where news, came through in your mail, and all the latest and greatest news was published right here in one of these wonderful gaming magazines.
Snaps! Real People Gaming on Mixer. Thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate it. And real quick, DOA, thank you for joining us today. DOA, appreciate you, man. He had a couple of things to say in the chat, too. He says he still finds it crazy that he's older than GTA because he was born in 1996. Yes. Oh, wow. Actually, yeah, you're older than even the original GTA, which I remember playing on PlayStation and Dreamcast. I have GTA on the Dreamcast. But it was when it was top down, which is crazy. He said he didn't play games until 2002. Okay, I see you. Dr. Mario for NES is what he played in 2002. Man, your parents, maybe they didn't like you, do they might have been like, yo, here's the Nintendo. They could have given you an N64. Just kidding, man. He says Walmart. This is fun. He says Walmart technically has a gaming magazine.
How do they?
Yes.
I am not familiar with that publication. So they do still run, right? But their subscription base is dwindling, right? It's nothing like this used to be the de facto method.
Oh, he said not Dr. Mario, OG Mario.
OG Mario. This used to be the de facto method of getting your information. there was an internet. It was a proto internet, you had your AOL, you maybe had some internet relay chat, but this was where it all happened, man. This is where you heard about what was upcoming. This is all the rumor mill, everything that was put in there, your reviews. It all started here. So we wanted to flip through. We thought it'd be cool to just take a look through this. We took some screenshots of some key pages and just kind of discussed what it was like in the world of February 97, what games were all the rage, what was a stinker, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen here and share it with y'all.
All right, cool. DOA says, no, my family could only find that system. I don't regret it. Is where I learned about Bad Dudes for NES. Yeah, for sure. No, I'm just pulling your chain, man. You definitely want that. My first system was also the Nintendo. At that time, though, only the Super Nintendo existed, which is kind of funny. But my first system was the Nintendo as well. I have a huge library. I still have that to today, taking really good care of it, even though the little springy part of where you put in cartridges is kind of janked up. But I definitely understand. It's definitely a fantastic way to start life in gaming. It's definitely Nintendo, especially because it had a 2-button system as well. So then, even children can really get into it really quickly. That's kind of why I started my daughter off with the Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Advance games, because it's a one directional pad, 2 buttons, so it's not overwhelming. And then as she has learned that, she now has gone and grown into a DS, which has 4 forward-facing buttons, right? So it's definitely a good learning there. But 2002 is crazy to hear that, because I had at that point I had been through many systems, but I'm much older as well, though. He said, I want an N64 again. I missed that system. You can still play it, bud. But yeah, no, I feel you there. All right, so Chris got something booted up here.
Got it booted up. So the first page here at the very beginning of most EGMs or most magazines, you had some advertisements. You'd have, what was great and I missed was people writing in and asking questions to the authors and stuff. That's not something that happens a ton anymore. But there was always like your write-ins. You had, or your dear Anns or whatever you would call them. But they would also have just kind of rumor mill stuff, little side notes, little bits. So this first page covers some tidbits in the February 97 era. And the one that jumps out to me as being real interesting, I'll go ahead and read it off to you guys in case you don't have the best of view there. And that is, from the big game to big screen, Capcom of Japan will team up with a German film team to make a flick based on the game Biohazard, known as Resident Evil in the United States. And overseas sources are reporting this. Expected to cost more than $20 million US dollars. The movie will feature monsters and new characters developed by Capcom via computer graphics, the sources said. Now, this is great. This is interesting because as soon as I read this, I had to go and Google, when did the Resident Evil movie come out? Here's the thing. It wasn't for 5 years later.
2001? Is that what
2002.
2002, okay.
And it definitely wasn't with I don't think it was with a German film team. I'm pretty sure it was like Lionsgate or something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure that they had an idea for it and they scrapped it a million times and it finally came to light.
Well, my memory from this, it was from a production company was New Legacy Film, and actually it was distributed by Constantine Film from Germany, in Germany. But it doesn't look like, I'm not sure, but I do know one thing's for sure. The Resident Evil movies were in development hell for so long. Like, I remember back in the day, the zeitgeist being, they're going to make a Resident Evil movie. They're going to make a Resident Evil movie. And, like, that was, like, the talk around the water pool at school, if you will. Like, man, I can't wait for them to make one. I know it's in the works. But, yeah, that took 5 years to facilitate.
That's crazy. DOA says, what's PS Club? I heard of PSN. This is before the time of the internet, my friend. But not PlayStation Club. He's assuming it's Sony's version of Nintendo Fan Club. Yeah, it's something similar. A lot of Sony, Nintendo, they used to do it back in the day to where you'd be part of their club, and then they would send you things in the mail, actually, and you would be able to, like, get certain pins or certain cards. I think in the Nintendo one, I don't remember being a part of the PlayStation one ever, but in the Nintendo one, they give you like a little ID, and you be part of like the Nintendo, like basically like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse kind of thing. But they give you like a little ID with like your name on it and stuff, and that was always like something that was like really cool that gaming companies did back in the 90s.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's it is titled PlayStation Underground. And I remember specifically I remember that it was like almost like it wasn't a subscription service. You did just basically opt in, register at the website. Like I said, there was internet. It was just not the primary means of distribution. But you would get like CD-ROMs. You'd get your that's where you get your demo discs.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, that's what you get. That's a big thing that you don't see a lot anymore. Now the eShop does have playable demos, but back in the day, that was it. You'd get your sampler. I remember the demo disc number 8 specifically. It had Cool Borders. It had Metal Gear Solid. It had like a Shinobi or Ninja Gaiden, one of the two. But you would get demo discs, and you would get them by signing up for these services, and they give you a taste of what's to come, what was in development. And that was a cool thing that really isn't done much anymore.
No, that hasn't been done in prior to like the PS3 era. I think it really kind of died out with that era because they used to do it for Xbox too. Xbox Magazine. That's the only reason I used to subscribe to Xbox Magazines. Every month, they would send you like this little slit, and it would have a demo disc in it. And the demo disc will always have 4 different games that they were kind of showcasing, and that's why I would subscribe to Xbox Magazine. EGM would do kind of the same thing, but EGM would put it in the back of it with like a perforated. It would be like a little slot where you could put the game in, but it would always be kind of really janky. So I do have some magazines that are untouched that I never opened, just for that reason, because I was like, maybe I'll just kind of hold on to this for one day. And I have a slew of different magazines, but yeah, I remember like specific discs that contained Spyro, contained Crash, contained the first like a little slit of Final Fantasy. Yo, what up, Big Time Mark on Mixer? Thanks for coming in, man.
Yo, what's up, sir?
I remember this being like a huge thing. I miss those days because
dude, I miss it too.
You would highlight the games that you were like really excited. You would read about them, and then they would give you like a little cut of the game that you could play. And I remember I would play a lot of these demos for a long time.
Oh, I'd play them over and over and over again. And that's the thing. And you got to get a taste too. That was what was so nice. You got to get a taste of a title before you went and spent your hard-earned money on it. Yeah. Just something that's not really done a lot.
At all.
A lot anymore at all. Yeah. I mean, again, the eShop, there are some select titles that'll be playable demos, but that's about it.
Yeah, and I am so happy that Nintendo has decided to kind of champion that, because its demos in itself is a rarity now, to be honest. So the fact that Nintendo has decided to champion that, especially for games that they're trying to push, like Dragon Quest, like Octopath, where not only do you have a demo or a slice of the game, not only is it a few hours, which is unlike any demo, but then you can carry your progress over into the real game. So I am very glad now to see that trend. DOA in chat says he's looking for a system. He bet we don't have a spare one. What system are you looking for? And he says, do you guys remember the Yu-Gi-Oh magazines? Nope.
I do not. No.
I don't think I ever subscribed to any, or I don't think I ever purchased any magazines that were around any card game. I know I have like books on like the Pokemon trading card game, but that's about it.
All right, so real quick, before we move on to the next panel, just a quick go over the top 10 EGM picks for January of 1997 were Street Fighter Alpha 2 for Sega Saturn.
Okay.
Rated at a 9.1.
Okay.
Tomb Raider for PlayStation, rated at a 9.1. Super Mario 64, rated at a 9.5. Tetris Attack. I forgot about that game. Rated at
really love that.
At an 8.3, and the number 5 at 8.3 as well was Dragon Force for the Sega Saturn.
Ooh, I love me some Dragon Force. And I love the fact that 1997 we have the Saturn in here, one of my favorite consoles of all time. DOA in chat said he's looking for a PS Vita. Oh, I thought you were looking for like a legacy system. PS Vita is super recent. I have a PS Vita and I have a PS TV. I don't have any spare one, but I do own the console. And Shonen Jump I never really subscribed to that either. I do have onesie twosies here and there. I was never a big manga person. I was into anime, but never manga. So I never really subscribed to Shonen Jump and stuff. And I've just never been a big fan of manga, or really comics for that matter, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. There's some key ones I enjoy, but not for the majority. So moving on here. Okay, so one of the things that was great about these magazines and taking a look back in 1997, we have what it looks to be a Tomb Raider, the first Tomb Raider, right? We were still on Tomb Raider 1. We were just being introduced to Lara Croft. And this is a great example of, first of all, how obtuse advertising was in the 90s. It was unabashed and just absolutely like there was no, back in the day. Here's the thing, kids. Back in the day, Lara Croft and Tifa Lockhart were like heartthrobs to your gaming community, even in
they were.
Even in their 4-polygon form. I mean, this was the epitome of a video game babe, right? So there was no denying what they were trying to advertise here.
Look, they had no qualms about knowing their audience,
right,
whatsoever, and they didn't have any F's to give, no pockets that were full enough. And they literally, what it says right here, sometimes having a killer body just isn't enough. And that's what's freaking fantastic about this. And take that for what it is that the marketing was just so on the nose back in the 90s that you couldn't, this ad, even it being kind of mild, even though we have tons of media that is way worse, this simple ad would not fly today. And that's what I find crazy.
You're absolutely true. And that's why I say it's so unabashed. It goes right to it. And here's the thing: you hit something is like it was so on the head, right? Like nowadays, you get Blizzard coming out being like, "What? You guys don't have phones?" As it talks about the new Diablo game coming out for mobile devices. It's just developers and marketing seems like it's become more and more out of touch over time, as whether it be like PC culture or just the CEOs being more disconnected from their player base or whatever it is. Marketing then it seems like it was made by developers, by gamers, for gamers, whereas now it's like by some suit and tie people that have to hit some numbers. And it's just kind of neat to go back and look at just how crazy the marketing could have been back then.
Yeah, and even today, Lara Croft still sells on like a sex appeal kind of thing. That is still very true. But the way in which they do it today is a lot different than what they were literally just like, boom, here it is. Now they still may flaunt the things that may be bringing you into the game, but the way that they do it now, it has to be very tactful. Really quick, in the chat, Steve said, magazines, that's where you see gaming news. This is very true, Steve. Big Time Mark, my bad. I'm probably not going to be playing Gears 5, probably for a while, my dude, so apologies there. So probably no Gears 5 for me. Too many games to play. I'm like literally jumping back into Destiny 2 tonight. There's just too many games, man. I'm moving on. But yeah, so it's just crazy to see. Plus, honestly, the other thing too is Tomb Raider was the second game that I purchased, or that I got purchased for me on the Sega Saturn. And that's where I fell in love with the Tomb Raider series, was on the Sega Saturn. I have that till today, and I've gotten back more recent than I would like to advertise to that too. Just because it's just such a nostalgia relic for me that even though it's just crazy, but I still really love that game like a lot.
So the last thing on this page I want to touch on before we move away, and that is at the bottom left-hand corner, IDOS hint line 1-900-288-4263, cost of call 95 cents per minute, must be 18 years or have parents' permission to call. This was back whenever you could literally call these places if you were stuck on a game and they would literally help you go through. That's what kind of world it was back then. It was the Wild West. It was crazy.
Do you know that I was stuck somewhere in Majora's Mask, and I called Nintendo customer service, and they had to transfer me to some department, and this dude with not heavy accent as you would think, like not like Indian or Filipino, something like that. Like this dude with just like this heavy accent. He must have been maybe Russian or something. Helped me get through some part of Majora's Mask, and it was just crazy. Now, granted, that cost our quest bill or whatever it was at that time, like $5 or something. But to me, it was worth it. And it's just crazy to think that stuff like that existed. Like, try calling, I don't know, EA or Ubisoft right now and be like, yeah, I'm stuck in this part in Assassin's Creed, right? Like, you can't even fathom that being like a real. When you say it out loud, you scoff. You're like, but there's the internet, right? It's just crazy.
Right. No, it's a completely different world. And on this next page, so now what we're looking at just a sample of how reviews were done back in the day, which really interesting. And the one thing I liked about EGM was that they would do aggregate scores. They would have several different, 3, 4, 5 different people on their review team rate it and then give it an aggregate score.
Yes.
So it wouldn't be up to one author as to whether or not, quote unquote, is it worth it? You would have maybe 4 people's opinion. Not only that, they would say, what's the best feature, the worst, the good, the bad. What, again, down here at the bottom, ingenuity, replay value, just a lot of different metrics that we don't see anymore.
Chris, so I'm gonna give you guys some inside baseball here. So, Chris brought me the magazine. He's like, go through it and highlight or sticky note like whatever parts of the magazine that you think is interesting and stuff. And I think this might have been one of mine. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris.
It is, yes.
And the reason I sticky this wasn't just because of the specific games like Dark Forces or anything that we see on the screen. The reason that I sticky this was because there was 4 different editors. So that kind of gives me a hint on why EGM may have ended a little earlier than they should have, was because of their review methods. Not only do they have the cool stuff on the bottom, which, yeah, that's cool. They have this dude right here, and they have this guy. So Sean, Dan, Crispin, cool name, and Sushi X. So we get 2 real names and 2 fake names, right? The fact that they have 4 people playing the Midway Arcade's Greatest Hits 2 is just the most misuse of company funds to pay 4 different people to write an opinion piece about Midway's Arcade Greatest Hits 2. Like, there does not need to be 4 opinion pieces on that game, nor does 4 people need to score it. And I just could not fathom. That's like me saying, okay, Chris, you're going to do a is it worth it video. I'm going to do a is it worth it video. And then Jakin and Rax are going to go do a is it worth it video. Then we're going to clip those videos, and that's going to be our is it worth it video. Like, doesn't that sound stupid saying it out loud, right? You're like, well, why wouldn't just one of you do it? That's what this is here.
There's two sides of that coin. I feel like that.
Yeah. Is there?
No, you're absolutely right. No, you're right. You're right. That is definitely a weird use of resources. However, I don't know that like if I know that Sean has a penchant to review LucasArts games bad because he's got a chip on his shoulder, but you got it counterbalance that with maybe 1 or 2 other editors also reviewing the game. I like the concept of aggregate scores. There's actually something I always liked about it. I didn't just get one chucklehead's opinion. Whereas now you go to Polygon, and it's like you see some opinion piece article or whatever, some review article that's like, oh, this game is bad and you should feel bad for liking it. Here's why. I actually like this model, though I do also agree the other side of that coin is you're paying 4 salaries to review 1 game. And I get that. You're
paying 4 salary. Imagine if it cost them, I'm going to put a fake number, Chris. Imagine if you and I, it cost me $750 to freelance commission me to review a game, and it costs you $750 to freelance a game. And then that means I have to pay 2 more people $750. And guess what we get to review, Chris? Midway's Arcade Greatest Hits 2. And we have to write a blurb about that. Like, that just seems like the most, like, yeah, I get you. I'm with you. I get the it's nice to have more people's opinion on games. Like, I do like that. But the reality is, if Sean hates Star Wars, Sean shouldn't be like reviewing Star Wars, or vice versa.
I would be interested to compare this to a later edition of EGM to see if they still did this.
Yeah, I can't imagine that this lasted very long to have 4 opinion pieces on the most minute games. Like as you scroll later into that magazine or any of them, you get bigger games, right? Resident Evil 2, Tekken 3, things like that. Okay, maybe have a few eyeballs on that. But when you have the games that's like the Midway's arcade class, that's the one that got me the most. I was like, so 1997 Midway's arcade classics. 4 people had to go and be like, yeah, game's shit.
I mean, there are instances where I think
fantastic.
Resources could have definitely been utilized differently.
No, it's amazing. It's amazing.
But
I love
but
it.
it was unique. I don't remember any other magazine even doing that at the time. So it was definitely something unique to them. And you may be right. It may be something that drove them ultimately into the ground later on. But awesome. Either way, yeah. Moving on, we have an interesting article here, Dom. What is that? What is that peripheral device there for the N64?
That is the Nintendo 64 DD. So I don't know if you guys remember, but do you guys remember like the Sega Tower of Power? This was a big thing in the 1990s. Was if your system was underpowered, like the N64, they would. Let me see. Where's mine over here? Hold on 1 second. Let me see if I can.
Is this like a 32X? Is this like a master drive? Is this like upgrading your console with a peripheral device?
So you would have your Nintendo 64, Chris, and then on the bottom of your Nintendo 64, not only would you have your additional cartridge here for additional RAM, you would then put an extra bottom here, and it would basically give this additional horsepower, additional RAM and horsepower. Then what they would do is instead of putting the cartridge up here, they would sell you a separate cart that was disc-based. And you remember UMDs? You remember how like the UMDs used to be like a little piece of plastic and the disc inside? But it was a cartridge with the disc inside, and you would put the disc thing in there, and that's how you would play like your upgraded versions of games or specific games. Like there was like a Zelda N64 DD game that never made it to the West. And it was just such a cool idea. And if you see on the bottom here of the Nintendo 64, there's like a little slit here for
it's like a serial port.
Yeah, it's for that exact attachment. Now, this serial port, like you said, went unused through the life of the N64. And if you ever had somebody who used this port, please let me know, because to my knowledge, this is probably the 8th time I've ever taken it off, and this is more for funsies than usefulness. So
as you mentioned, the big story of this show, whenever going over this disk drive system, was Zelda 64 for the 64 disk drive. That never made it over. The whole concept around it was that the disk drive runs at approximately the speed of a 5.4 times CD-ROM and could hold up to 64 megabytes of game data, and that was 8 times that of an N64 cartridge.
Isn't that crazy?
That is. You know what's crazy, really, honestly, is that they built the N64 forward thinking that they would do such a crazy abomination. Like, it's got the port built into it.
Yeah, I mean, so does the GameCube. The GameCube has 3 different ports that mostly went unused. Like on the bottom of my GameCube, I have the Game Boy Advance adapter, and it takes up 2 of the 3 ports, and the other port was for the Ethernet adapter for your internet, and the broadband adapter for the internet. And so it's crazy how a lot of these ports have. Some mastermind, some video game scientist was like, we need to do this in case we want to do this. And a lot of times that never happened.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the crazy thing. I mean, nowadays, like you maybe get like your Switch refresh where there's an extended battery life, or maybe you'll get a Switch Pro or a Switch Lite or XYZ, but like a whole like add-on peripheral to your already existing console never is going to happen. And the thing about it is too, I mean, we've got titles here, GoldenEye, we've got Yoshi's Island, we've got Mother 3, Kirby's Air Ride. I mean, there were the major hits slated for this disc drive, but of course, I mean, it didn't take off in America. That's why nobody's ever heard of it. But it's just weird that back in that time period, it was keep the console you'll have. We'll give you this bulky add-on that's so niche you'll never use it. and nobody actually it never went anywhere. So I guess they learned pretty quick in that decade.
If this thing had gone to the West, I guarantee, Chris, I would have had it.
I guarantee you would have too. You could always get one imported. You know, somebody out there's got one for you.
Oh yeah. They're extremely expensive.
Are they?
It didn't sell well in Japan either, because most of the time the question people asked were like, "But is this gonna play different games?" And the answer was, "Well, a couple." So yeah.
So moving right along here, another thing that we always look forward to in an EGM and what was going on in February of 97 was that Soul Blade, which is the first installation of the Soul Calibur series, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep, it exactly is that.
So it looks like they were doing a centerfold on the Soul Blade series. And it says that it's no secret that fighting games are one of the favorite types of games in the EGM office. It's also common knowledge that one of the most popular fighting game around the office is Tekken 2. But they recently received a copy of the new fighting game for PlayStation, Soul Blade. And the whole article is an expose about the upcoming release Soul Blade. This isn't even out yet. This is all insider screenshots, insider gameplay, insider review. And the difference between this and their kind of blurb reviews is that these are full. These were where the meat was. This is where you would read about the upcoming titles, and this was the only way you could get a glimpse of it. And so Soul Blade was coming in to break the binds, knock Tekken 2 off of its platform, if you will. And I thought this was a really cool article.
So what fascinates me so much is the world we live in today, when a gaming company puts something out like a teaser trailer and it contains 2 seconds, 10 seconds of gameplay, or no gameplay sometimes. What always fascinates me is the whole internet now explodes, going like, why even show us anything? Show us real gameplay, or show us more gameplay, or show us this, or show us that. And in the past, when I was a kid dreaming about the next game I'm going to play, you would have to imagine what this game is going to feel, play, look like off of a handful of screenshots, sometimes 2 screenshots, depending on the game, because you might have been excited for some niche-ass game, and that didn't get a whole cover. That got like the little top part there. And off of 2 screens, you have to be like, oh, this game coming to the N64 or the Dreamcast. And you would literally, as a kid, imagine what it's going to be like. Now, it would never end up like that because your imagination goes all these places. Suddenly, you're in the game. I just find it crazy that the day we live in now, that we get all of this stuff and people aren't happy with it. Back then, it was either you had no freaking idea or you got a magazine and you had to imagine it based off of like a screenshot, maybe.
Yeah. Another thing too that I thought was cool is that they have release dates, they have the publisher, they'd kind of give you insight into how far along the game was. Like there's a bracket here that says it's about 95% done. They would also give you a difficulty, like how difficult is it going to be? Is it going to be really hard? Is it going to be really easy? And then they give you all the insight. Is it going to be a CD-ROM package? What type of genre does it fall into? So yeah, I mean, whenever there's maybe 10 screenshots total and maybe a few paragraph article to go off of, you were essentially taking because there wasn't video, there wasn't launch trailers. There wasn't video circulating around the internet for beautiful CGI footage and finding out what the world was going to look like and what the vibe was. Yeah, you went off of some stills and basically a couple of people's opinion, and kind of hope for the best on that. So it was very interesting.
What's crazy too is Soul Blade ended up coming out, and then a year and a half later, when the Dreamcast launched, then Soul Calibur came out. So it's basically Soul Blade, Soul Calibur, and then Soul Calibur 2, so on and so forth, which is interesting.
So, and excuse me, I think it's interesting too, because if you take into account what's on the cover of the magazine, Tekken 3 was about to come out, right? It's an article, it's covering all of Tekken 3. So I really see that as being a pivot of trying to dethrone Tekken off of its title with the release of Soul Blade.
NX Revolution in the stream. What is that?
What's up?
What's up,
What's
dude?
up?
We're here in the blast from the past, we're rewinding all the way in 97, bro.
Rewinding all the way to February
Right,
97.
so we got Resident Evil 2.
Resident Evil 2. So one of the other major articles, especially in this issue, and of course you would have so many centerpiece articles over the course of the magazine, and then you'd have your little bits along the way as well. This one is cool. I remember, Dom, all the hype surrounding this game. Quite possibly one of the most, I'd say, anticipated games of its time. And I would say of the Resident Evil series, the most anticipated title. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Yeah. Freaking NX says, "Oh, the year before that, I was born." Nostalgia.
Hey, you grew up playing it, right?
Right, exactly. But no, yeah, dude, I remember the hype going into this. Well, you know what's funny, Chris, is not only I was just as hyped for Resident Evil 2 as I was. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Soul Reaver. I was extremely hyped for Soul Reaver, and I had these games like both like on this pedestal. And it's funny to see this article now because I remember reading about Resident Evil 2 coming, and I wasn't able to get it when it first came out on launch. I think it took me like a year to get it. So I actually ended up with Soul Reaver first, which is funny as well. And they're not similar, but they are both horror-ish, scary type games. Obviously, Resident Evil much more. But I just find it crazy just thinking back, like, when this came out, of thinking of, like, I was hyped for this, but I was also hyped for this other game that never measured up, which is kind of where the funny part comes in. Steve says, in the chat, I remember reading an article about Dino Crisis. That game was awesome. Yo, what up, Brian? NX says he played
in the house.
SNES, N64, and GameCube, so yeah. PlayStation 2 and Dreamcast as well. Great choices. But yeah, I mean, this is your baby, Chris. This is Resident Evil 2.
Oh, absolutely. So the thing is that when you say that hype for this is Soul Reaver, I don't even know like what you're smoking. Soul Reaver, I remember
Pop Rocks, I was like 8.
Yeah, I mean, you don't smoke them, you eat them, dumb. The thing about it is Soul Reaver was such a blip on my radar personally. I'm not saying it's a bad game. I'm not saying it's a bad game. Because I never played it. it was actually included on the demo disc 8, the legendary Sony PlayStation demo disc 8. Was
legendary.
It was late in the PlayStation's life cycle, but I remember playing that demo and not really being hooked by it. What was it? Before I move into my rant about Resident Evil 2, what was it about Soul Reaver that was so put it on such a pedestal for you?
At that point, I was a big fan of like gargoyles and vampires and things of that nature. And at that point, because it was Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, the main villain just always looked so ferocious to me, and it very much intrigued me always of getting to Kain, which was the villain, like your main antagonist.
The Legacy of Kain, yeah.
And that always really interested in me was, like, again, we only went off of screenshots, and I would always see a screenshot of like the big bad in the game, and I was always so excited. Now in '98, I ended up getting Soul Reaver, and it didn't disappoint me. I had a freaking good time. I have it on the Dreamcast as well, and I love that game. But obviously, it doesn't measure up to Resident Evil 2. But I would still say it's like a 9 out of 10. It's just when you're talking about legacy, like the history that it leaves behind, it doesn't measure in anywhere near Resident Evil's probably 10 out of 10 at that time when they came out.
Yeah, so I was just curious because, like I said, I saw it and I wasn't quite like crazy gripped by it. It did look pretty cool, but I think at the time when I was playing adventure style games, I was really sinking my teeth more into stuff like I played Medieval a lot, which is great because Medieval is, I think, coming out really soon. So I'm personally, as somebody who that was probably one of my favorite adventure titles on the PlayStation. I'm really looking forward to that come out. But of course, this article here, it says when Resident Evil was first released on the PlayStation, it quickly became one of the system's top title. To date, Resident Evil is the best-selling PlayStation title in the US, so it's no surprise that Capcom is following up the game with a sequel. Riding on the heels of the first game, Resident Evil 2 looks like it just might eclipse that macabre look and feel of the original. The sequel begins where the first one left off after discovering the biogenetic experiments going on in Raccoon City. The team of stars have left. So the article goes on to kind of give an expose about what Resident Evil, of course, by this point in time, we already, if you haven't played Resident Evil 2, where have you been? Please go back and play it. Even if you have to play the remake, I don't care how you do it. It's great segment in the Resident Evil lifespan. Arguably, I think 1 and 2 really hard. They're both so good in their own ways, especially if you go back and play the GameCube remake.
I was gonna say definitely play the GameCube remake. That was gonna be the one I still hold that as being the best. This weekend, the Resident Evil pack of the Resident Evil remake and Zero came up for like $44.99, and I was like, $5 more and I'll jump in. 5 more and I'll jump into it because I really want to replay those again, just because those ones were just so amazing. The other thing I was gonna tell you, Chris, too, is with the Resident Evil hype, the other Resident Evil game that I was so hyped for, because I remember I was a Dreamcast owner when I was a kid. The game that I was so hyped for was Code Veronica X, and obviously I think that still goes down as one of my favorite Resident Evil games.
Absolutely. No, it's great.
I was so hyped for that game, and it was all because of EGM during that time.
Right, absolutely. And one thing I wanted to point out here is, the article goes on, and kind of a thing I want to touch on that I don't think this really happens a ton anymore. And that is, if you guys, I'm flipping back and forth here. I'm going to flip back and forth a little bit. I'm going to spend some time on each one. If you guys take a look, and I know they're a little murky, I did my best to get an image with the camera. But if you notice maybe the screenshots at the top of the screen, and that would be the second one in the middle and the top right as well. And then the one in the center screen as well. And even, some at the bottom, at least 2 or 3 out of 3 of these screenshots. A lot of these screenshots, the reason I'm pointing them out, they actually didn't end up in the game the way that they are depicted in the screenshots.
No.
Especially the second screenshot, or the first screenshot in the center there, when it says right over when you have blood-sucking zombies on your tail, no place is completely safe. Right above that room there, that never. I've played Resident Evil 2, I probably know it like it's my own son. I know every room in there. I know every camera angle. That did not make it in. Going over to the second page, here's a clear example. First and foremost, on the right side, one of the bosses depicted there. We know William Birkin and Mr. T were the 2 bosses in that game. Neither of which, that character model there, that's a placeholder. That is not a finished product.
Mr. T or X?
Sorry, Mr. X, not Mr. T. Hey, I'm pretty the fool.
Mr. T.
Mr. T.
I was going to let it go, but I couldn't.
No, you can't. You can't let Mr. T go. He comes for you. The bottom right screenshot, right above the difficulty setting, where there's a police barrier and it looks like there's a target range. That's not in the game at all. That never made it over. Likewise, down here at the bottom where it says Gamer's Edge Resident Warriors, look at that. Elza Walker is named for Claire Redfield.
Who the F is that?
Who the F is that? This just goes to show you, the reason I want to point this out, this just goes to show you that a lot of the content you saw in these magazines were so early in the game's lifespan that your finished product that you end up getting may have been moderately similar, sort of similar, a lot similar, or in this, complete character overhauls, and complete room overhauls and complete restructuring. I always, when I see stuff like this, I always wish I could play the demo version. I always wish I could play, the dev version, and see all the content that was on the cutting room floor.
Also, real quick, yeah. I want to talk to chat, because I got Brian and Steve in here. Brian he's the man. He says he thinks his was Gran Turismo. Here's my PlayStation 1 right here, guys, and I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Look at that. I'm gonna pop it open. You see what that is? That's Gran Turismo 2, the best racing game, not only on the PlayStation, but one of the best racing games of all time. This man says CT. I don't even know if you count Crash Team Racing as a racing game. It's a kart racer. I don't know if it's a racer though. And that was just wanted to point that out.
No, it's I never played much on racers, so I'm not going to comment there. I played some Test Drive 5, maybe some Need for Speed 3. That was about it. And they were only because they were burned discs, because you could play pirated games back on these consoles as well, and I did often.
Me too.
But I digress. So if you guys have played Resident Evil 2, you know that Claire Redfield is the second of the two characters, brother to Chris Redfield, staple of the series.
Wife.
Elza Walker, have no idea who this is. So I'll also go to this point because if I remember specifically in EGM, Dom, have you ever seen the screenshots for Resident Evil 0 when it was an N64 title?
Yes, I have, and that's why 0, even though it's it's such a weird game, is still one of my favorite GameCube games, but it's one of my favorite games because I was hyped for it prior to its existence. And it was a much, much different game on the N64 from what I remember.
But a lot of times we don't get packages nowadays until they're almost basically polished.
Exactly. That's what I was going to tell you too, not to cut you off. Sorry, Chris. I was going to tell you too, the Aladdin and Lion King remake, they're coming out here in a few weeks, and they're going to include the demo that was presented in E3 1995 or 1994. And that stuff like that interests me the most because I'm like, yo, they're going to include a demo product that was available to not even the public, but that was available before the game existed. I was like, yo, that's freaking cool.
No, that's awesome. That's what I'm saying. I'd love to see the dev version of Resident Evil 2 somewhere in its not 1.0 version, it's 0.0.5 version, before they made whatever changes they made. I think that'd be really cool.
I would love for that to be DLC for the remake. Imagine.
Oh, that would be super cool. We're never going to get it, but that would be super cool.
No, we're never going to because Capcom put it out. It sold bonkers, and they're content. I'm content with the product that they pulled out, but imagine, like, that'd be dope. The next thing is going to just be the next game, but that would be cool.
So moving on from Resident Evil 2, we've got another flagged page. You flagged this one for sure, and this one goes over Cool Borders, NFL 97, 10 Pin Alley, and NHL Open Ice. All PlayStation titles except for NFL 97. Why'd you flag this page, Dom?
I mostly flagged this just because I wanted to take a look at how sports games looked in the past prior to just really knowing what they were doing, because you gotta think in 1997, 1996, these were the first iterations of sports games coming into the 32, 64-bit era, and these companies were just getting a footing on what sports games are going to look like. Like the PlayStation was in effect till like 2002, but if you look at like Madden 2001, right, versus NFL 97, or if you look at this NHL Open Ice doesn't even exist, but it doesn't even have a year on that. But you look at that versus NHL 2000, right? It's just crazy to see where we come. Now the other thing I sticky this was because of Cool Borders, just because it's one of the staples of the PlayStation platform, and I think Cool Borders really build a pathway for better games like SSX Tricky, 1080 Snowboarding, a lot of the other snowboarding games that were far superior, but I feel like Cool Borders kind of laid the groundwork.
You know what made me feel old the other day was whenever Tony Hawk's Pro Skater turned 20. It was like last week.
Yeah. Doesn't that make you feel a little crazy? And Tony Hawk, I remember, like, I had that on everything.
And I want to just comment on the beautiful ray tracing on 10 Pin Alley there. I don't know if you can see the real-time reflections on the lanes there. It's beautiful.
I mean, not even like pulling your leg. That looks pretty damn good. It was like a pretty damn good bowling game.
For PlayStation, yeah. And you're right. The sensibilities of these games back in the day, they really were trying to find their footing. I remember going back a lot of the times, and it could have possibly turned me on to sports games. They were very clunky. They were very like, look at that pass lane on NFL 97. It obscures like most of the gameplay. Like you can't even tell who it is that you're throwing through or where your blockers are. Or
And the other thing I love about this too is we are now in a environment or a climate to where one game maker makes this, one game maker makes so NBA is 2K, NFL is Madden, NHL is NHL, right? MLB is the show. But before, in the 90s or even the early 2000s, you had NBA 2K, you had NBA Heat, you had NBA Live, you had NBA this, you had NHL Open Ice by Midway, you had NHL by EA, you had NHL by 2K. So I just find like we had options as wanting to play a sports game, and now it's pretty much like, do you like football? You play Madden. You know, like football,
Yeah.
you know, play Madden.
Yeah, it's true.
There's no middle ground, because even before, like, I think the year after this, we got NFL Blitz. You like football?
Yeah.
You like football a little bit, but not real football? What about Blitz? You know what I mean? So it's just, we had all
Right.
these options that we no longer have, which suck.
Yeah, it's true. I like it whenever there's competition amongst developers, because it leads people to make the best game they can instead of just kind of hitting a status quo. But I digress. We do have the major brands making their major brand publications, and really a lot of that also goes to the NFL saying, I only want EA to make my game. You know, we're licensed to them. Back whenever it was more open, you could maybe license to a few people, or maybe it was even unlicensed. But nowadays, that just doesn't fly. On the last page here, I want to take a look at here with you is the send us your old games and systems, receive a check back, or purchase other titles of your choice. This coming from BRE Software. You can contact them at 209-432-2684. I'd love to see if that number is still active. But take a look at it. $5 off coupon on your next mail order with a clipping of this coupon.
Chris,
this is pre-GameStop.
This page is see the specials tab that you can cut off, and it says buy 2 get 1 free Sega Saturn. There is a game that I own called The Bronx. It's one of my favorite Sega Saturn games, and the reason I love that game is it's a really good fighting game, similar to like Dead or Alive. But they had what do you call it? They had weapons in the fighting game, and it was really well balanced. At least it felt that way. I haven't gone back to it in 20 years, but I played that game up until like the early 2000s, still on my Saturn, because my Saturn stayed plugged in for a while after it went off shelf. But the reason that I wanted to point this one out is because I did one of these specials. Like I remember asking my mom that, hey, these are the games I want for my Saturn. Can you please buy it for me? And she was like, absolutely not. And I was like, but I get one free. Can you please buy it? I'm not going to ask anything for Christmas. I did anyways. I'm not going to ask anything for my birthday. Of course I did. You know, it was you had those kid conversations. And I remember she did, and she bought it for me. And I can't, for the life of me, remember. I think one of the games was, it was similar to, it was like Sega's version of Medieval. It was some other game, but I can't remember the games I ordered, but I remember specifically the free one that I chose was The Bronx. And at that time, I didn't even know what game I really wanted. I just knew that if she bought me 2, I got 1 free. And that's why I sticky this page specifically, just because I love this. Like, I love this so much that you had options to buy video games. I wasn't just going to the store. And Chris, you got it in the freaking mail. Like, it was like the coolest thing ever.
That was unheard of for that time. It was really only physical retailers. There's no digital distribution. There was no Amazon. And one of the things I like about this too, take a look at the pricing on there. A lot of people do, and I can even catch myself complaining about a $60 title. Doom 64, $49.92. Cruising USA, $49. Super Mario Kart, $54. And actually, that was a spotlight of this. So Mario Kart had just came out around this time of this magazine. $34, $39. I mean, a lot of these pricings. I mean, yes, maybe on some of them there was buy 2 get 1 free, or buy 3 get 1 free, and maybe they did do some pricing. Or specials rather, but really apart from maybe $10, $15, $20, games really haven't risen that much in like 20 years.
Well, yes and no, because this was something that they would discount this a little bit more because you were getting it through here, but if you would go into your KB Toys, your Mario Kart would have cost you $69.99. Because I remember like I got some games in the mail because they were cheaper. And
So were they used or were they brand new? Were they sealed?
They were sealed.
What the hell?
Yeah, they were sealed, but I remember like that's how I used to talk my mom into getting me some games. Like I'm not talking like I ordered dozens of games. It was probably like onesie, twosies, right? But I remember that's how I would convince her to buy me games sometimes, because she was always buying crap off magazines, CDs, cassettes, and stuff. So that's how I would convince her to buy me some games sometimes, because we would go to KB Toys. I would ask her, she would inevitably say no, and then it would come out for $40 or something on the magazine. I'd be like, hey, remember we saw that? It's $30 less here. Can I please have it? And you go down that whole rabbit hole of begging. And she would cave a lot, and it'd be for these things that I would get in the mail, and I'd be waiting, I'd be checking the mail. When the mailman comes, I'd be like, basically ripping his face off to get into the mail, hoping it was there. And it's just so much nostalgia in this stuff. But yeah, the other thing too that you said is, so the one thing I will say is, yeah, game prices haven't risen necessarily, but they have normalized, because this era used to be the wild, wild west, because you could have $89.99 games. You could have 75, 60, 50. It would be this huge range of and there was nothing special about them. You would get one cart and the other cart, right? It wasn't like today to where like your $90 a special edition or deluxe or ultimate or whatever. It was just the game.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And I do remember that pricing was wildly done by system and by even publisher or whomever was doing it. And that was, I don't know, maybe for better or for worse. I mean, you could get some steals on some titles, other titles. Maybe we're going to run you a pretty penny, but yeah, it was definitely a different time. It was a different place. I, for one, loved taking a trip back through this. That is our last panel out of the magazine. There's a ton of cool content in these OG EGMs, especially if you lived it. I'm not sure how many people out there did, so I know it may be a little bit more niche. If you didn't live it, maybe it doesn't mean quite as much to you. But the main point we want to bring to the table here is just how different the world was in 97, in the gaming world 97, and also how much it's the same. It was still like, we still get most of our news through certain mediums, whether it's digital or physical. We still do everything we can to get a physical copy on the cheap, whether it be through, this reminds me of like a clipping from a comic book. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like those old comic books that you get your whoopee cushion or whatever. Like, it's very different, but also you can see where it has impacted where we've come to today.
Yep.
And why maybe some of this stuff was phased out as well, because it's not as practical. But at the same time, it was definitely a very cool experience if you were getting this sort of content. And if nothing else, I hope that Game Informer lives on, just so this sort of media, just so this distribution doesn't die out.
I hope so too, because even next month, I'm going to be getting my Pokemon edition of Game Informer, and I am very excited for their cover art. They're going to have 2 editions of it, and I will be going to GameStop to search for the other edition that I don't get naturally in the mail. And I'm still the guy who poops and reads a magazine. I'm gonna go there with you. I have my Game Informer, and when I gotta do, I grab my Game Informer and I go and I flip through the pages and I read me an article to it. Now, do what I did when I was a kid and, go through like everything like internet doesn't exist? No. But I go in and I see things that don't necessarily make it on their website that I wouldn't normally read or catch. And that's still pretty cool, because no matter what the internet is, it doesn't take away from the editorial phase that goes through a magazine publication, and just the amount of work that goes into a magazine. It just baffles me that Game Informer still exists today, because there's a lot of work that goes in there as opposed to just being on the internet. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's pretty much. I appreciate everybody coming in. Came in. Thank you guys. Thank you for sticking with us as we took a stroll down memory lane. If you loved it or hated it, this was my idea. I had a lot of fun doing it. And who knows? Maybe we'll do another one or a sort of similar thing in the future. Maybe not. But either way, I do appreciate all the looters who came out to go through it. And I appreciate Dom for sticking with me, even though I'm feeling a little under the weather. I did my best. Sir.
That's all we can ask for. And guys, thank you guys so much for chilling with us. Whether you're watching this back live or on the replay, let us know down in the comments down below or just in chat right now before you leave if you like this kind of episode or if there's something you want to see more specific, because we would love to cater to you. So let us know what you guys like and what you guys want to see moving forward, and we will probably do that. Now, from Dom and Chris, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you guys come back tomorrow night, as Chris, it's his night, and he's got a special surprise for you guys. Let's see what he finds, and you guys can come back on Thursday for the podcast or 5 days a week for life.